Hello, everybody. Welcome to Music Meets. I don't even know which season we're at, series, sorry, we're at now, and I'm not going to try remembering. But the new series, and today we have with us pianist Veronika Shoot. No, we call her Nika. So Nika Shoot. And we are going to chat about yoga and meditation and how it affects music and all of these wonderful topics. So, Nika, do you want to say something a little bit about yourself before we proceed to chat?
I'd love to. Thank you, first of all, for having me. It's such a pleasure to be with you again, even though in virtual form. And a little bit about myself. I originally come from Russia, but I moved to England when I was 5 and I grew up in the nature. So I grew up in the southwest of England where I was surrounded by trees and fields. And it's a very cultural place. I also grew up among musicians, artists and writers and composers. So I came because my father is a composer and he was invited as composer in residence. So I was always surrounded by music. And then I went to music schools. I did the whole lot in UK.
As you
To go through all the details, but I had a very deep musical education. And I met you in the Royal Scottish Conservatoire, and that
Yes.
was the best part. I really enjoyed it there.
So did I. I think it's one of the best conservatoires out there. People are so approachable.
Yes, yeah,
Mm.
very wide-ranging everything and
Why don't you?
friendly. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the education part. I don't know how to start about the rest. But now I'm living in London and kind of carving, that's the word, carving the path that feels most authentic. And it's all sort of coming together since this crazy pandemic, I'd say, really. When things started to change, it was very challenging, but at the same time, created a lot of space to go inwards
Right.
and really sort of start sharing what I'm loving more.
Mm. How did you come into yoga and meditation and all of this?
So that goes back to my childhood again, interestingly. Growing up in Dartington, actually, the person who introduced me to yoga was my father.
Mm-hmm.
And he was studying this by himself. So he was reading some yogic texts when he lived in the Soviet Union. And we weren't actually, we didn't even have such books. He was translating them from Polish and he found some special copies. So he became interested and brought the practice into his own life in whichever way that he could. And so he introduced me when I was a child. I used to practice with him every morning. And the first benefit I felt, actually, which I love sharing, is through Shavasana, which is corpse pose, literally lying down. That's where I
Yeah.
really felt the power of this practice. And as a child, also, I loved storytelling. So he explained it in such a way that I imagined myself as a heavy rock one moment and the next moment as light as a feather. And also controlling my breathing at that point as a child with this storytelling created such a powerful sensation.
Mm.
And then and so the practice kind of was born. The seed was planted then,
Mm-hmm.
and then I would come back to it throughout my life.
Childhood has a very strong impact. I guess when seeds like that are planted at a very early age, they tend to sprout wings unexpectedly.
Unexpectedly, that's what's incredible. It was planted, and then I went to Yehudi Menuhin school actually, and Yehudi Menuhin was practicing yoga himself every day, and he actually brought Iyengar to the West first from India, and I loved Yehudi Menuhin very much, and I that's why I went to his school for 5 years, and living there also had an impact because we lived in the nature and we had a silence practice every day. Although, of course, a lot of students didn't take it very seriously, and there was
Yeah.
some love that definitely left an impact.
Mm.
And then the seed was again a little bit buried. And always when a difficult moment arose in life, I found myself going deep into the practice again. And finally, through the years, the last years, really, it has become an integrated part of life, part of my life.
That's wonderful. It's so wonderful that, it was introduced to you in a musical context as well, which is really quite interesting, because you don't see that happening anywhere, not many places, or very, very rarely.
Absolutely. That's what's really fascinating. And now, funnily, I'm sharing a lot of that with musicians.
Yeah.
But it wasn't much introduced otherwise, other than this way, even though it came like that into my life. We didn't really have, there hasn't been such a focus on wellness, I'd say, for
Yeah,
musicians.
I agree.
Now perhaps it's becoming more important, because we're becoming more aware of mental health problems, and also how our breathing impacts
Yeah.
the way that we feel, anxiety, performance anxiety, not even to mention, I
Yeah.
mean, that's like a norm. Some people, of course, have extreme performance anxiety, but for me, it just became a norm. Like, oh, of course, there's immense anxiety. This is the life I chose.
Yeah.
Really.
It dawns on you, and you're like, you love it, you love it, you love it, and like, but why did I choose it in this way? There's so many ways I could have incorporated music into. Anyway, I mean, I'm glad for the choice, but as you say, you question it sometimes, especially when you're feeling that anxious before going on to stage.
Absolutely. And I felt a little bit, I'd say, pressured or expected to follow this already carved concert path. And that didn't feel expansive enough somehow for me. And I was resisting it, even without wanting to. And that's probably when the yoga's journey started to deepen. And I went to India, I went to the Himalayan mountains.
Beautiful. I really
To
want
an
to go to the Himalayas sometime.
Sorry?
I really want to visit the mountains sometime. It's been on my bucket list, and I'm in the country, but Yeah. So, I mean, how has it impacted you as a musician? How has this impacted you, like being a meditator?
That's a very good question. It made me slow down my breath. It's impacted me quite greatly because it's given me the courage, I'd say. It's given me the courage to be true to myself in the music, first of all.
Right.
So regardless of the other things and how I feel during performances, it's given me courage to dare to think outside this box that probably I've created myself, but we sort of get that idea that we have to create it
Yeah.
somehow. Yeah, and so yeah, it's given me the courage to discover myself on a daily basis, and through all practices, and the humility and the gratitude and all of those things that are constantly evolving, that are also part of the music making, because to be fully in a musical experience, we have to. It's an integration of all the elements. We cannot separate one from the other, like technique with music. This all comes together. So the body becomes the vehicle through which to express. And if we ignore the body and the breath, which I used to do, I used to get actually so involved in a piece of music I was playing that I would forget to breathe in the climax.
Yeah.
And then I realized that something was happening to me. I was having like a hyperventilating sort of effect, just from the excitement. And although that seems great to look back on, because it was funny, I wasn't in myself at that time, so I wasn't able to be in the music the way I wanted to, because the nerves came in and stuff happened to my body that otherwise wouldn't have done. If I had thought that it would be important to even think about such things. And also, it's impacted me in a way that I trust myself with my breath. So there's always, we were talking a little bit about nerves before.
Yes.
That's like a friend that comes in. It's like, oh, it's the nerves again. Okay. And I was trying to fight things. I think resistance is a very difficult thing, and of course it's an ongoing journey. But resisting things creates more anxiety and more tension when we feel something. And I think that the first time I realized that I could really have power over my breath and connect it with my music was when I was having my final recital in the Royal Academy of Music.
Mm-hmm.
And just a few days before, I'd say 5 days before, I just realized how much work I had to do. I was playing Schumann Carnival and Frank Prelude, Chorale and Fugue, and it was all relatively new. And it felt very difficult. It really, I realized that unless I was focusing 100% every moment, then I was really involved in the music. Unless that was the case, I wouldn't be able to manage. And of course, we all know as musicians, when we play in a concert, we have to expect that 80% is going to fall down, possibly from the situation, from the nerves. So we have to be 180. That was a very nerve-wracking thought, because I thought, what if this happens? What if I can't concentrate, or I don't feel great on the day? And I was really quite nervous. And somebody offered me some beta blockers, which are, you probably know what they are, but they're pills that slow the heart down. And I know that they are taken in some cases, and people need to take them. And it's actually been in the world of music for some years.
Yes.
And not in music, I think in other professions too, where people have resorted to taking something, and maybe not only beta blockers,
right,
to manage. But I remember I had them, and I actually still have them as a souvenir. I'm never gonna have them. I remember this moment. I didn't know right until I went whether I would do it, but I made a decision 5 days before the concert to work with my breath every day, and to create a space to totally tune into myself,
right.
no matter what stress I felt. And I did a breathing technique every time then before I went on stage. The first time I tried it then, and it worked like a wonder. And yeah, so since then I have immense trust in my breath, I'd say. It's so beautiful to discover, and also to connect with you. Obviously, that brought us as well together to discover that that's been such a big part of your journey. And I so much agree about the meditation aspect being in everything. And at the beginning, perhaps when we start a practice, we're not sure when it's going to click in, or we wonder, when am I going to feel some effect? It's not like baking a cake. Where's my result? But just suddenly, no, gradually it starts to creep in into the life moments. And actually, I'd say that everything can be a meditation, and that actually leads me to what I wanted to share, how it's connected to music, because in a way, making music is like a meditation. When we go past that state where we don't have to think about all those things, when we're just beginning to learn something, let's say if we're improvising and we're learning a piece, there's a lot to focus on. And when we can surpass that stage, then it can become a meditation, because we are completely inside it, and it's a sort of no mind state. But of course, that's the ideal, and it doesn't always happen, and it can happen when we're washing the dishes as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's a lot of people say it's a matter of trust. You kind of trust to let go of control, but at the same time, the moment you let go of that control, you're gaining a certain other kind of control, but you're allowing. It's very difficult to put into words, isn't it?
It is, but that's so important, because that's where we let go of fear. And because if we can possibly let go of fear, then love can live. Then we can give to something more important. But of course, we've been taught to have a lot of things there for safety, which we think are our security.
Yeah.
But they actually prevent us from breathing.
They do
those things. So yeah, so I think that the marriage of this, actually, my vision, I'd say, is to connect everything that is disconnected.
That's a very good way of putting it.
Yeah, and I think that everything, actually, one human being to another we can see as connected, but we so often disconnect ourselves.
Yeah.
And all the things that we're doing suddenly become, there's a symbiosis between them, and they all become connected.
Yeah.
And then it becomes simpler. The
It
action is
does.
not.
It does, doesn't it? It does become a lot simpler. I think it becomes simpler because you don't need to necessarily think about it all the time. It's working itself. You don't need to be controlling it. And I know we're going into a realm. I think a lot of people who see this will probably be like, "What are you talking about? You know, like, what do you mean it's controlling itself and all of this?" But and I think that's a fair question. A lot of people have that question, but I don't think it's one that can be answered. It's only one that can be experienced. You cannot tell somebody that, oh yes, it's this beautiful thing, and you lose control and all of this, and it's wonderful when you lose control and everything is in control, and they'll think that you're crazy. But when you experience it, it's something else, and it's not an experience that can be forced down someone's throat, which is why I think you have to choose whether what you want to do in your life. And it's very
Absolutely.
important to choose to meditate. It's one thing that I really genuinely feel. Like, if the person is willing to, only then will there be any kind of result which is worthwhile. You can
Absolutely.
never, tell somebody to do it.
No, absolutely. And that's a very interesting point. That leads me to the whole thought about education and teaching,
Yeah.
because that's such a deeply important part of all of our lives, and the way that we relate to the meaning of those words. And it's the same, I think, in that in when somebody shares something with us and they are in the role of a teacher, it is actually it's another symbiosis, because the student wishes to receive something which then becomes their own.
Yes.
And so it's a complete, it has to be one's own experience. And the same in a yoga practice. Now, since I'm sharing yoga with people, even more so, it was difficult to start sharing, because I thought, who am I to start doing this? But then that's also an ego thought. It's not I am great or I am not great at all.
Yeah.
That all goes out. There is this tradition, and there are some incredible keys that have helped me. And all I can do is to welcome that into the room, share that. And then for somebody else, they will have their experience and what comes in for them. And that's actually the beauty of the practice, of the yoga practice or the music practice. We're not sharing ourselves, even though we're being true to ourselves.
Yes.
The music is through us, or the practice is living through us in the way that it does.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.